Hi everybody, it's Steph from Stellium Astrology, stelliumastrology.com, the Stellium Astrology podcast. You know this, you've been listening for a while, but just in case you haven't, I'm an astrologer. I used to be a student at the London School of Astrology, where I now teach classes, and I've written horoscopes for a number of publications, including online and in print. I used to write for Elle magazine, and that was kind of cool, going to the supermarket and buying Elle magazine, flipping to the back pages and finding my name in print and the work that I'd written. That was such a trip. But yeah, so I've written for a number of things, and I am obsessed with astrology. Maybe I'll have to do a little refresher show at some point talking about my journey, and I'm doing all sorts at the moment anyway, as far as recording episodes are concerned. For a long time I've wanted to do just random ad hoc episodes, but I also really wanted to get a kind of a solid framework down for you guys to learn about astrology, which is why I've got a kind of Learn Astrology series, which is how I started the podcast, launched the podcast. And I've had a number of people contact me, submit their charts for me to analyse on the podcast. And, it's been fantastic reaching out to my network, my personal network of astrologers who I, students or experienced practicing astrologers, everybody who's interested, who I just absolutely love being in touch with and hearing your regular insights and updates on what I've discussed in the shows. People have been getting in touch and saying how much they love it. Some of them have been leaving me reviews on iTunes and other podcasting platforms. I greatly appreciate that, as do the people who discover the podcast through those platforms and your very, very lovely reviews, the many that I have received so far. I appreciate you, the effort that it took for you to actually do that, because I am also guilty of listening to something, loving it, and not actually leaving a review. So the fact that you've actually taken the time and the effort to do that for me, I appreciate you. I also have an audience who I appreciate greatly on a different platform called Patreon, where I have 2 different tiers at the moment, currently anyway. Who knows if I'll add more. One of them are my BFFs and the other ones are my VIPs. And there are a number of benefits for signing up to be a patron of mine. You get all sorts of additional exclusive content, current content about full moons and new moons, the current astrology, all sorts of things, courses and interviews and everything. There'll be a link at the bottom of the description for you to go and visit my Patreon page and check it out. But also you can receive discounts on my readings and services. So if you're interested, if you were thinking about getting a reading or, curious to check it out, don't forget to do so, because, I've to show my lovely patrons that I appreciate them greatly, there is a treat for you guys as far as discounts and savings are concerned. There are some free downloads on my Patreon page as well, so you can scroll down and there are posts you'll be able to access and download, free downloads, PDFs, just anything that I think that you guys would like, that would help you along your journey. So with all that waffle aside, I just wanted to talk today about coming out as an astrologer. That sounds a bit odd, doesn't it, to actually have to come out? However, depending on where you are in your life, who you're hanging out with, astrology is it's an unusual subject. I think it's definitely much more popular now. It certainly seems to be. It seems to be absolutely going crazy. Whenever I go on Instagram, there's always, maybe it's just because of the algorithms that I see these things, but on social media people are a lot more open-minded to astrology these days, but still it's still not completely mainstream. It's always been a kind of fringe subject, and it's considered by Wikipedia a pseudoscience. Me personally, I used to think it was a scientific subject. I used to think it was a science, because it's so, if you're going to draw the natal chart, there is a kind of, it's quite mathematical. If you're going to hand draw it, you kind of have to understand how to divide things. Everything's degrees. When you're working things out, certain calculations, when you're looking at timing events and things like that, you've got to convert things. There is an element of mathematics about it. But to call it a science, to go as far as calling it a science, I don't know if you could. There was an article written, I can't remember where it was now, it might have been the Mountain Astrologer, an article written about why you can't measure astrology like a science, and there are things like the rising degree can affect outcomes, the moon affects outcomes. There are no two moments that are quite the same. Maybe thousands of years apart there are, but it takes a long time for all the planets to be exactly in the same spot that they were once upon a time, every single one of them. It's if you think about the fact that our solar system is spinning through our galaxy, basically we're all moving around the Milky Way, which is galactic central point. The Milky Way is the giant supermassive black hole at the center of our galaxy, which some say it's like a giant sun where it's sucking all the light in. But there are many arms to our galaxy, and it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. If you're really into astronomy, I would highly recommend on YouTube you can watch something called Journey to the Edge of the Universe. National Geographic made a version of it, and the National Geographic one is narrated by Alec Baldwin. And there's a British one, I don't know who did it now, but Sean Pertwee, who used to play, his dad used to play Wurzel Gummidge, and he has been in all sorts of films like Event Horizon and Alien, Dog Soldiers. I love Sean Pertwee. He's been in loads of things. Both of them have really lovely voices to listen to, and I own both of those copies on DVD. I would recommend, if you're getting it, get it on Blu-ray nowadays. But yeah, you can get an HD version of it on YouTube just to watch for free. So I'll have to try and remember. Let me just scribble it down now. Journey to the Edge, because I don't want to forget, and then you guys miss out on something. It's a very long one, and it's great because it takes you on. It's like one camera sweep that takes you from Earth to Mercury and Venus, and then to the Sun, and then you sweep out to the Moon and Mars, and you go out through our solar system, and then you get to the very edge, you get to the Oort cloud, and then you're suddenly travelling through our galaxy and to different points in our galaxy, and then you pan out and you can see our galaxy and you can see galactic central point, and then you're out into the universe, and you keep travelling back, going through wormholes. But it's kind of a scientific, what we know about the universe, or what we've hypothesized about the universe. So very fascinating. And if you're a bit of a space nerd, like I have always been, long before I got into astrology, long before I kind of knew there was more to astrology, I was always interested in astrology. I wanted to be an astronomer and study astronomy. I had a telescope, and I've always been super nerdy and into space and stuff. So this was something that I absolutely loved. But actually, if you do think of the nature of the fact that our solar system is constantly in movement and moving through the stars and moving through space in a spiral motion, travelling in a big spiral galaxy, there will never ever be two moments that are the same, because if we are, as the scientists think, we are expanding, the big bang and that big expanding motion that we're just spreading out further and further, we're just continually moving. So I just don't think that we could ever have two moments that are exactly the same, unless of course we're talking about deja vu and we're talking about a whole different area of like metaphysical subject matter, which is also equally as fascinating. However, digressing yet again, today I just wanted to talk about coming out as an astrologer, because like I said, it's not a science. It's not very easy to prove that, we can't prove astrology. Astrology is really hard to prove. You can prove it to yourself, but I don't think there's much as far as proving is concerned. I don't think it's very easy to sit down and write a scientific paper on astrology and to necessarily prove that, it's not in the same way science is. You can't necessarily run tests to prove, the existence of something or the lack of existence of something. The thing is, nobody's disproved astrology, but nobody's actually proved it. I don't know who's actually spent time actually trying to actually, research the subject on a scientific level. I know there's a couple. There's Dr. Percy Seymour, PhD. He did some work into a scientific basis of planetary energies. Very interesting, actually. And also, who's the other one? The Gokhalans, and they have done research into planetary placements in a natal chart and whether you have a predisposal to being more sporty or scientific, or being quite a leader in your profession in some way, politics, acting, that kind of thing. Very interesting research yet again. But again, it's few and far between, and the people that do get involved with astrology tend to get discredited quite readily, very quickly. I did write an article which I refer to the Gokhalans and to Dr. Percy Seymour with some links to their work, which I think is called Worlds in Collision. So I'll have to share a link with you for Worlds in Collision. But actually, when you first get into, I'm just making a note of that. When you first get into astrology, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this, you get into this kind of thing where you just have to talk about it all the time. I mean, I've never grown out of that. I've learned when it's appropriate to talk about it and when it's not. But it's difficult to it's difficult when you first start learning astrology, especially if you start learning how to read natal charts. So I'm not talking about like just horoscopes in the newspaper. I'm talking about people who've looked at the natal chart and suddenly understand, oh, we can look at moon placements and oh my gosh, Mercury retrograde now, what's that doing to my chart? So you can start doing this, like talking in pure jargon, which I know used to really infuriate my sister. My sister would be, she's okay with it now. I think she understands it's a process, but it is a process. That's exactly what it is. And when you first start out on your journey, you just start talking about the symbols, and you say, oh, Mercury's doing this, and so and so, Saturn is squaring my moon at the moment, and it can be hard to understand how to translate that into real life for people to understand what that actually means. So when you're studying astrology, saying that stuff in your head makes sense and you don't have to articulate it, but when you try and articulate it, it can be difficult, but that's part of the journey. However, when you've got friends who are not into the same stuff as you, it can be a time in your life, it can be difficult, where you suddenly find that people start to distance themselves from you, because not only is astrology a very unusual subject and like I said, quite fringe and alternative, it's also considered to be very woo-woo, and a little bit people see it as a belief system, almost like they think that you believe in something when you're doing astrology. I know when I started doing astrology, I was just interested in it and I was just curious to learn more. I found it very interesting, and I definitely saw patterns with when the moon was in certain signs with myself. I definitely kind of resonated with it, obviously, and so I'd started to explore it, but I didn't go into it as a belief thing. I believe in astrology like it's a god that I want to follow. It was more of a intrigue for me. But people kind of think that astrology is kind of like a belief system, and they do often say, oh, I can't believe you believe in this stuff. And it's not quite like that. Definitely not for me anyway. I've heard some people describe astrology as a language. You don't have to believe in Spanish to be able to speak it. You don't have to, believe in Dothraki in the Game of Thrones to be able to learn Dothraki. It's one of those things where it's there to learn, to articulate, and to apply to your life. So for myself, I kind of like that idea, because actually when you are looking at the symbols, when you look at symbolism, when you can learn about the many different facets of what a symbol can represent, as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and a symbol is exactly that. It's almost a picture which is representative of thousands and thousands of meanings. We are able to take two separate symbols, put them together, and then you get that kind of overlay from each one, which brings an element of itself to a joint message, which you can then articulate, you can interpret, and you can, yes, this is where there's a area for personal influence from the astrologer, where they take what they have personally understood of those two contacts and are interpreting for you. The art in seeing an astrologer, a good astrology astrologer, is somebody who can remove their personal experience and projections from that kind of transit or aspect, and can articulate it in a way that it makes sense to you without actually telling you what you should be thinking or feeling. So that again comes with a lot of practice, dedication and time, unless you just happen to be one of those crazy people that are just, slip into just being able to do it, which I think there are people out there that do have a natural aptitude for certain things. But yes, coming out as an astrologer, how did you come out as an astrologer? How did people take it? Did you tell people that you were learning astrology, and what were their reactions? I remember I'd been studying maths and science with the Open University in the UK, and I have a lot of friends who are very atheist and very scientific. When I started studying astrology, they very much distanced themselves from me. They thought I'd gone mental. They thought I'd gone crazy. And I just was very shocked to see that kind of reaction from people, because I just thought, I don't understand why it's okay for me to study physics and science, but when I'm looking at something like astrology, that really offends you. I couldn't get my head around it. And I may have mentioned this previously, long time ago. I went to a friend of mine's birthday. A couple of my best mates are just really anti-astrology. They're just not into it at all, and that's totally fine. I can be friends with people who aren't into it. It's not my... I don't want to be like totally tied up in my ego with this kind of thing. I am more than just astrology. I am me. But I went to a party and there was this guy there, and he was kind of flirting with me, and I was just like, he was asking me what I wanted to do. And at the time I was working as a barber. I'd left my job in the civil service, and I've been in the civil service for about 7 years, and it had totally destroyed me. I just didn't really want to have anything to do with it anymore. And this guy was going, so what do you do? And I went, well, at the moment I'm a gentleman's barber, but I'm planning on doing something completely different. And he was like, what's that? And I went, oh no, I don't really want to tell you, because I don't really, people can be quite judgmental, and I'm not really interested in telling you about this. I don't really want to face any kind of judgment. And he went, no, it's fine, honestly, you can tell me, I won't judge you. And I went, well, yeah, I want to be an astrologer. And he went, what? Why do you want to do that? And I thought, you're judging me. And I just said, because it's a much more in-depth subject than you could ever really know. And he just, he honestly just was reeling in shock over it. And just suddenly, immediately, I became this idiot that didn't know anything. I could have a PhD in physics, but if I said I do astrology as well, suddenly I'm a complete idiot. So you do get these kind of strong reactions from people. They don't quite believe you. They don't know how to take you. Some people think you're a bit mad. Some people think you're, a lot of people don't really understand the depth of astrology. If I can do a podcast and every single week I've got something else to talk about, and the subject can go on for over an hour if I want to, I think that is an example of quite how deep the subject can go. But people don't really get that about astrology. They think it's Mystic Meg. They think it's the star sign column in the newspaper, which, don't get me wrong, I've written horoscopes, you know this. But it's not the kind of thing that people think is a serious career choice. And it isn't really very easy to have a career as an astrologer. It's not the type of thing that you can really get to, it's a very difficult thing to have as a profession. There's not a lot of money in the work. It depends how you do it. Everybody's different. There are people out there that practice astrology as their full-time job and have fallen into it very easily, and other people have had to work really hard at it, and some people just do it as a hobby because they just don't see the potential in it. Whichever way you choose to do it is totally up to you. And it just brings meaning to my life and is a passion of mine. And I know that through astrology I can help other people. And the only way I can really show people that there's something to it is by picking out certain transits I know will have been poignant for them and saying, so what happened on this date in XYZ. I can see that you had a very challenging time and you probably moved house or la la la. Or I can say, oh, in about 3 weeks it's going to be Mercury retrograde. If I was you, I would back up your computer, or I would do this, or I would do that. And then when something goes wrong with their computer and they think, oh, hang on, she did say something about that, But the people that aren't interested aren't going to take it on board. There are people that the second you start talking about it, switch off. And I used to try and defend astrology. I used to try and defend my choices. It was falling on deaf ears. It was a waste of my breath. And then you've got somebody like my partner's twin brother, who studied philosophy at the London School of Economics, political philosophy, I think. And he said, I really want to believe in astrology, but, I need you to prove it to me. And I was like, I'm not going to prove it to you. And he was trying to argue the subject with me. And I just said, look, how much research have you done into the subject? What do you know about your personal moon placement? What's your rising sign? Do you know anything to do with that? And he was like, well, no, I haven't really done any research. And I said, well, surely the first thing you learn about academic argument is you can't argue a subject that you don't know about. You cannot argue for or against something you have no understanding of. And he'd say, yeah, that's true. And I'm like, so I'm not really going to go into this conversation with you unless you go away and do some research. I can't teach you everything about astrology in 5 minutes because I've been learning it for like years and years and years, and I'm still continually learning it. So yeah, it's difficult. Often people who are curious about astrology will ask you questions. They might think it's a bit silly, but they'll sort of say, so what is it that you do? What is this astrology thing that you do then? They'll be kind of curious. And your job is not to just suddenly swoop in and go, I can give you a reading if you want. Let me show you, blah, 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 because it's overwhelming. If they're showing a bit of interest, let them take the initiative to pursue it in their own time. I have experienced this myself. People sort of laugh about it and make a little joke, and people really have no idea what it is that you do. One of my friends who's come to me for a few readings, when I told him what I did, he was like, oh, do you look in a crystal ball and all of this? And I'm like, nope, I don't. But and I don't consider myself a very woo-woo person, I must say. I'm not particularly fluffy. I'm a spiritual person, but I don't really have a kind of, I don't know, I just don't consider myself very woo-woo. I like certain things, but I am a practical Capricorn as well, so it's a bit of a conflict for me to be kind of full on woo. I like to be a little more kind of real world about what I do, a bit more practical. But people do come to you and they ask you questions. Even today, I've got somebody who I have not spoken to for years and years and years, who's just contacted me and said, good morning, can you tell me what's going on? Because I'm just feeling really, really moody and depressed and angry, and I don't know what's going on. It's really confusing. Is something happening in Libra? It's like, well, it's definitely going to be much bigger than that. It's not just something in Libra. It could be your moon sign, your ascendant, it could be anything, it doesn't have to be specific to Libra. But you get these people that you don't hear from for years, and then suddenly people are coming to you saying, I was just wondering if you could maybe help me out a little bit because I just don't know what's going on. And there are points in people's lives where they do look for alternative answers. And these are the periods in time where actually people are going to be more likely to be open to alternative therapies, alternative methods, and ideas that perhaps they weren't prepared to entertain previously. There's so many people that come to me and it's their first astrology reading and things like that. So, it's I don't take it personally when people aren't into astrology. There are some people that just aren't going to be, and there's no point trying to convert them. There's no point trying to defend the subject. You just leave it there. You park it and you leave it. And I just let my work speak for itself. So and I have to say, being able to write a horoscope column for Elle magazine changed a lot of people's opinions on what I'm doing. Not because suddenly it was she's writing a horoscope column. I think it was more the fact that it was Elle magazine. It was like, okay, so now she's obviously been doing this a long time. She's really into it, and actually she's writing for Elle, and you can go into the supermarket and buy it. It'll be everywhere. And it's that kind of thing where it's almost like a stamp of approval, where people can say, wow, okay, yeah, well then maybe she is actually kind of credible. Maybe there is more to this than meets the eye. How on earth did she manage to do that? And the amount of people that from my past that suddenly were like getting in touch with me, really interested in what I'm doing. I mean, not everybody's going to get that opportunity. I do understand that, and you have to create your own opportunities. I really believe that. So if you want to have a horoscope column, believe me, before I got Elle magazine, I was writing to everyone asking if they wanted somebody writing horoscopes for them. I was writing for my website anyway. Everything I do with astrology has been like outside of my normal 9 to 5 day job type stuff. I'd be doing full-time work on top of that. It's just what I've been doing for so long. It's like I've got 2 jobs. Oh look, Miss Gemini Ascendant and a Capricorn Sun has 2 jobs. 2 jobs that she's very serious about both. But it's that kind of thing where you have to be proactive. But when you do get that thing that helps people to relate to you, the people who need to have the facts and the figures. Now, Elle magazine isn't a scientific graduation square cap on your head that tells everybody that, oh, I've got a PhD in astrology. No, but it is a credible publication, one of the top selling magazines in the world. And yes, I was very, very, very fortunate, very lucky to have a horoscope column with them, which suddenly made everybody think, oh, okay. So, there are ways that people do end up turning their head, and your work will speak for itself. I find the best results come from keeping your head down, getting on with things, and just, over time, the wealth of information that you gather and the way that you communicate it through whichever medium, the way that people are finding you, however it is that you're doing what you're doing, you will eventually attract the right people, and even the naysayers will be like very curious. I found that there were people who used to laugh about what I did and didn't really sort of like pay any attention to it, and then those same people would be bragging to their friends that they knew me and would be pimping out my readings and saying, oh, she'll read your chart for you. Like, I'm not good enough to read your chart, but suddenly you want me to read for everybody you know and just act like you've got this, like, somebody who can just, pimp. You can just start pimping out my readings. Don't get me wrong, I'm a generous person. I'm quite happy to just look at somebody's chart and give them a little bit of insight about themselves, just show them that, if they're open-minded and they're interested, that, astrology really has got something to it. Otherwise, why would I spend so much of my life doing what I'm doing? I just don't like the people who are that kind of, I don't want to call it shallow. I don't know. It's that kind of, when you just kind of, they're not people that would have ever given you any credit, and suddenly they're using you to show off to their mates. It's a bit weird. Not like I'm a pop star or something, but if I was, I'm sure there's a lot of, I know my ex, he got a record deal and was signed to Sony in the 90s in a grunge band, and people who he didn't really know, who had always been complete arseholes to him, suddenly were like, oh yeah, I know him, yeah, he's a mate of mine. Yeah, and he'd get phone calls from people saying, oh, can I get some tickets to your gig? And he'd be like, who are you? Sorry, did we go to school together? So yeah, I think it happens whenever you get a little bit of success. And yeah, I don't write horoscopes for Elle anymore, but that definitely was something that I know not everybody gets the opportunity to do. So for me, that was a very special experience, and it gave me that credibility that I craved so much as a Capricorn. However, not everybody needs that credibility, and people can just practice astrology and do what they love. But I would say that there is... It's like there's a meme that's going around that I've seen, and it says about relationships, or it says about love. It says, love is like a fart. If you have to force it, it's probably shit. And that's kind of how I feel about astrology. If you're having a conversation with someone and you're really trying to force the subject on them, that it's not for them. They aren't interested, and you will never convert them. And you shouldn't try, because people come to these things at a time in their life when they're ready. And also, when you start reading for clients, if that's the way you want to go with your astrology, You won't attract anybody who isn't ready to hear what you have to say. You're going to attract the people who carry a message for you just as much as you carry a message for them. I find that consultations are a two-way thing, and it's a very interesting thing because through the client work that you do, you meet people who start to represent aspects of your own learning. It's a very interesting thing. It's a very magical thing, actually, and not just through astrology. This is just through life. We always attract what we need at that time. In the same way the ascendant-descendant axis is about I versus us, you can't attract somebody into your life and have an enriching and meaningful connection with them without having something that you have to share and learn and grow through. So it works in all kinds of relationships. But as far as coming out as an astrologer is concerned, it is a big deal. I found it a big deal. I found it quite challenging. I wasn't able to truly be who I was without feeling a sense of embarrassment, because people always kind of picked on me for the things that I was doing. I was never really a kind of mainstream person. I always did sort of like off the wall, side, fringe subjects, and I was always really interested in alternative ideas and stuff. But with astrology, it's just so, people are so able to just bash it. It's just a subject that people are quite prepared to have an opinion over because they've read their horoscope in the newspaper, and they just don't believe that, I just don't believe that every Capricorn in the world can have the exact same day. Well, of course they can't. Of course they're not going to. It's not like that. I've written an article on my website. I'll have to put a link to the blog post. 5 classic reactions when I tell people I'm an astrologer. One of them, it was actually inspired by something that my uncle said to me at a family party. He said, so this astrology stuff. And I was like, yeah. And he went, how much of it is just a load of nonsense? And I was like, depends on what you define as nonsense. Depends on, how open-minded you are. Have you ever had a reading? It's just people that just say that sort of thing to you, and you just think, you tell someone that you're an astrologer and they suddenly think they know everything about you. They know exactly who you are and what you're about. Another one of my cousins, whenever I speak to him, he always just jokes about, oh yes, it must be something to do with all the chakras, and like, oh yeah, this kind of like third eye, like going into this kind of like Eastern metaphysical spirituality systems of understanding, which I'm not anti, by the way. I'm a qualified Reiki master practitioner, and working with chakras and energies and things like that are all incredibly powerful, and I get that, but that's not all of me. That's not what I'm entirely about. I do think that stuff's interesting, but you've got one cousin who just thinks that they're just gonna, like, I'll talk to them and go, oh, I've just been having a bit of a tough time lately, and they're like, oh, is it because your chakras are off balance? It's like, maybe, but that's not what I was talking about. I'm just talking about the fact that I was having a bad time at work, or that kind of thing. So yeah, people like to make assumptions. So it can be quite difficult to come out as an astrologer. It can be quite hard to stand your ground. I know that when you come out as an astrologer, a lot of people tend to drop away who suddenly think that you're a bit nutty. They're just not on the same page as you. I met a lovely lady. I did a talk in Birmingham in the UK, and I met her. It was her first astrology talk she'd ever been to. Kirsty, hello. We're friends on Facebook now. If you're listening, Kirsty, lovely to have met you that day, and I'm glad that we've continued to stay in touch. But actually, she was telling me that her friends all thought she was going through some sort of weird thing, and she was experiencing the exact same thing. And that is often the thing with like a spiritual awakening, or with a discovery of something so outside of the mainstream. People just don't know how to take it. And I would say just do what makes you happy, and also don't preach to people. I think that's my key takeaway from today. Don't become a preacher. Don't try and convert everybody. Yes, of course, say, can I look at your birth chart? People often don't know much about astrology, are quite happy to give up their birth details so that you can explore it. And, some people are open-minded to hear about it. A lot of people love to hear about themselves, so it's not really a problem. But if there's people that are really, really dragging their heels and really putting up a blockage for you, Don't worry about those people. You don't need to convince everybody. And if they want to prove it to them, tell them that you'll, happily have a debate about astrology, but just how much have you studied? How much have you researched? Just how much of the subject are you aware of? I always test them by saying, so what's your lunar placement? Do you know where your moon is, what degree it's in, what aspect's your moon? And if they can't answer that, which is probably most people, when they learn about astrology, one of the first things they learn about is their moon. If they can't answer that, then you can just say, look, until you know even something as basic as that, we can't have this conversation, because you're not here to prove it to people. Don't waste your breath and your energy on that kind of thing. Okay, so yeah, that was just a little half rant, just talking about, coming out as an astrologer. It's quite hard. I found it quite hard. I still don't share it with people when I meet them. I tend to keep it under my hat. I really don't share it with a lot of people. I just come out here and I do this online, and then people can Google me and find out and go, oh my gosh, she's like some weirdo. Just before I go, one final thing, where I was working, I had some business cards delivered because I was doing an event at the Saatchi Gallery, where I was meeting, it was around my Jupiter return, and I've talked about my Jupiter return a lot. I've got Jupiter in Sagittarius, which has a publishing vibe about it, and I did this event at the Saatchi Gallery, and I was surrounded by journalists and stuff like that, and it was quite cool. I got these lovely business cards made because I just thought, I want to have something nice to hand out to people, and the business cards arrived while I was on holiday in New York. And I got them delivered to my work because I thought if I got them delivered to home, they might not get through the letterbox, so I'll get them delivered to where I'm working. And somebody opened my post at work, and everybody at work found out what I did on the side. And then there were all these whispers going around about, oh, she does astrology. And it was the one thing I really didn't want to do, because I wanted to keep it very separate, because people do discredit you and people do think you're just a bit woo-woo and a bit crazy because you're interested in alternative ideas, and because you can see things in a different way to other people. I found it quite intrusive and quite exposing, but that's just me because I'm a Scorpio moon. I like to keep things to myself. Don't feel obliged to share it with everybody. If you're a very open person and you're quite happy for everybody to know, then definitely do it. In the early days I did, but I kind of learned to protect myself because people were like quite ready to attack me. But just do what feels right to you. All I'd say is just don't be a preacher. Don't be barking at other people that they're wrong and you're right. There's something out there for everybody, and we all have different languages in life. We all have different areas of interest, and we all have different paths to pursue. And some people have the path which is not astrological, very mechanistic, very real world practical, and those people, some of them will be open-minded, but some of them won't, and that's fine. That's their journey, just like you're on yours. So don't get too hung up on it, but just to let you know, coming out as an astrologer is really hard. I would love to hear your personal stories about coming out as an astrologer. Share them with me. You can email me, stephanie@stelliumastrology.com. Again, if you're enjoying the podcast, just leave me a little review on iTunes. Check out my Patreon page. There is a little Facebook group connected to the Stellium Astrology. It's called the Stellium Astrology Community. That's a free Facebook page that you can join up to, Facebook group, and people go in there and share their ideas all the time, and it's always fun to connect with other like-minded people. But there's also like a private community for my patrons, which is just in the early stages at the moment. So if you fancied meeting some other people going through similar experiences or have been through similar experiences like this, then definitely consider joining up. And I'll speak to you next time, guys. Take care. Bye now.